You're listening to the Electronic Media Collective Podcast Network. For more great shows like the one you're about to enjoy, visit electronicmediacollective.com. And now, our feature presentation.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Movie Graveyard. We are very excited to be rolling in here tonight with actually we're going with a 90s classic. This is our second 90s movie. And I have a huge roster of people to cover this with me. You've actually heard every single person who's going to be on here tonight on a show before, but you haven't heard them all together. So let's get right down to it. I am I am the originator of this circus. Everybody, you know me. This is the GOAT. But I want to introduce my friends here. Sitting right directly in front of me, I have a guy you'll know very well. I think he actually maybe has the record for having the second most appearances on the show after me. We got the one, the only, the part-time, gone full-time. He's always around doing something. Gravedigger here. Welcome, Trev 3K, to the show. Trev, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well, and we got an all-star roster for an all-star movie. It's exciting.
Absolutely. This was your idea, not only to cover this movie, but to get the whole gang together. So I appreciate
Well, they say like it's exciting when you usually figure out who your friends are by their interests, and it's just exciting to know that I have three friends who love this movie as much as I do.
Exactly. Over to my left, I have a man who's made a few appearances on this show. I think one of the last times we saw him, he was hanging out at the Chopping Mall, but he's come back. I want to welcome a man who is very well versed in the giant monster phenomenon. I'm talking about Byrd. Byrd, what's going on?
Not much. It's good to be here, and I'm surprised that I know three other people who have seen this movie.
Absolutely. And last but not least, over to my right, I have a friend here who he's popped in on the Graveyard before, even though it wasn't technically the Graveyard when we were recording it, but then it became the Graveyard. This guy I've known for years, obviously done many podcasts together with, but I had to, in order to get him to come on here, I had to agree to two things. Number one, I couldn't talk about any of this year's Oscar nominees. And number two, I could not bring up Star Wars. And I said, okay, that's going to be very hard. I'll bite my tongue just to get you on the show. But, everybody, the one, the only, the Jelli is here. Jelli, what's going on?
I'm glad to be here. And yeah, this is one of those movies that, God, I think the reason we found out about all of us liking it is because I said, hey, I watched this really kind of weird movie, and you guys were like, you've seen that movie? So
it really is one of those ones that, like, when you make new friends, you're like, oh, have you ever seen this? And no one has, and you're always kind of bummed,
It's interesting here that like Goat said, this is the first time all four of us are appearing on the Graveyard. We've all four done so many other podcasts together.
True. Yes.
Yeah. We also should mention that, get ready to feel old, this year is this movie's 20th anniversary. So
right. And I just realized that the other day, and I was like, wow, it's actually good timing to do this. So before we get rolling here with the main feature, let's do one last check, because I got to check to see if our DVD players or Blu-ray players are awake. Everybody check this one last time. Okay, I think we're ready to go here. Again, I guess we should say we are watching the big hit, if you have, but obviously you know this if you download this. I am going to say
I gotta go change my Blu-ray.
Oh, what were you watching? The big shit? But yeah. So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, go, and we all have this pause at literally the 1 second mark of the DVD or Blu-ray, which is just a black screen. It's going to come up on the either Columbia or TriStar logo. I can't remember which one. But I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, go. When you hear me say go, hit play on your remotes here. Everybody, remote in hand. All right, 1, 2, 3, go. All right.
It's a logo we don't see in front of movies anymore.
Exactly.
Oh, we do every night. There was something I just watched that did have it.
Yeah, like they retired. It's so confusing. Sony bought. We're talking about TriStar Pictures. They retired TriStar for a while, but then they brought it back. So I don't know if TriStar is dead or not right now, to be completely honest.
I swear,
due for a comeback. Are you guys noticing that like Orion is back, and it's like really exciting to see that logo again?
It is.
Something I just watched had the TriStar logo, and it was something like from the last year or two. Hold on, I'll figure. Oh, Baby Driver.
Baby Driver, okay. Yeah, maybe TriStar's been, yeah. Because Sony, well, technically Sony was never really studio. Sony, the company, bought Columbia Pictures at one point in time. And then somehow Columbia and TriStar were hooked up, so they kind of like... But there was, for a while there was movies coming out both on Columbia and TriStar. But this had the 90s TriStar, because it didn't have like the actual video of the horse running towards the camera, which was always the best TriStar logo.
This movie's irreverent because it doesn't capitalize anything in the credits.
No, I was gonna say like the credits are very much like in almost like vignette style. Like the main chunk of the movie is very kind of sequential and linear, but when you watch the credits, like it starts out like there's in like during the opening montage, like there's really like a lot of like just little things that are kind of thrown at you right away. If you're not paying attention, like you might miss kind of some of what they're setting up here.
So I saw this in the theaters on opening day.
Wow.
I was 13, and I think this was the second R-rated movie I'd seen in theaters. I saw Go, I think, a couple weeks before this.
Wow.
And my mom took me and my friend to see both of them. I can't imagine. I can't imagine what she thought of this.
This is a pretty weak R, though, really, in terms of that. I mean, there's definitely some, like, blood and everything, and some swearing, but nothing that a mom, I think, would feel too bad about taking her kids to see.
Go, on the other hand, I think...
Yeah, Go's very R.
A little more strange.
I think with this one, at the time, like, the reason this is probably mostly R is... And I think the lack of gore is probably more to budget than even, like, intentional. But I think at this time, if you remember, like, now PG-13 movies, especially because they make a lot of PG-13 horror, PG-13 movies are very gruesome now. And this movie was, like, black humor. But it was very gruesome, like this opening part where Mark Wahlberg is, like, throwing arms and legs out of, like, garbage bags. You didn't see that kind of stuff. Like, now you kind of do in PG-13 movies. But back then, PG-13 movies were very... not as dark and gruesome as they are now.
I thought you were going to say it was R because no little kids should have to see Elliot Gould drunk.
Well, that too, but let's be honest.
Should we just briefly say what this movie is about, just in case, because this isn't a super popular film.
Yeah,
so we just gave a little plot description.
Well, you guys also have a lot of people that just like to listen, right?
Yeah, we do. It's really only...
So the big hit's a 1998 action comedy starring Mark Wahlberg as a kind of like mild-mannered, meek, nervous hitman who is part of a team of assassins, and they're kind of unhappy with how much they're paid by their employer, and so they decide to go and do their own job, kidnapping the daughter of who they believe is like a rich businessman. And then it turns out that she's actually the goddaughter of their typical employer. And Mark Wahlberg has to kind of like hide her in his house until they can figure out what's going on. And then things just escalate from there. And I'm sure we'll talk about the rest of the story as we go along. But that's just a basic breakdown of this. But what I guess it's most noticeable for, and what we'll talk about quite a bit on here, I'm sure,
that
is it's Mark Wahlberg's excellent physique.
Well, I saw the John Woo credit.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is it's definitely... indicative of a time in American action cinema when they were really heavily bringing over the Asian influence. This was kind of all the rage around this time, and that's what Big Hit is really remembered for.
Well, this movie came at a time, like I said, I was 13, and I was just kind of discovering, Tarantino and Rodriguez and stuff like that, and I was kind of going through a John Woo phase, and his name is actually what got me interested in this.
Well, Hollywood was going through a John Woo phase at this point.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this is also when he was kind of blowing up, doing stuff like Mission Impossible 2 and Face Off and stuff like that.
We just got, I mean, it's a little over now, but we just got basically the defining characteristic of Bokeem Woodbine's character in this movie.
Right.
He has never jerked off in his life until last week.
And now it's completely
now
changed
the rest
his
of
life.
This movie, he's like... He can't wait to get home so that he can go jerk off.
Yeah, because
By the way, that just felt so like old fashioned, right? Just watching like all of your main male leads just showing their asses in like a locker room
right,
scene.
Yeah, you don't get that now. Yeah, I want to say that basically around this time period, the mid to late 90s, like a lot of the action stars had fizzled out. Like Stallone's career was very hit or miss. Same with Schwarzenegger.
Arnold was at like the end of days level where no one really cared.
Yeah, Goat, I particularly wanted to talk to you about this because you and I are roughly the same age, and we certainly remember this a lot. When the 80s was a great time for American action films, but the late 80s and early 90s it really started to kind of peter out.
You're right.
And the answer is definitely at that point, if you were an action junkie, you were probably getting you were watching like bootlegs of like the Hong Kong stuff because they were coming to be known as that's where all the crazy action was. And Hollywood finally started to catch on to that. And I think like this is definitely a follow up of, like Rumble in the Bronx came out here in 94 and 95.
Right.
And actually hit pretty big. And suddenly you had them they brought over like Super Cop and stuff too. And then they brought John Woo back after an initial attempt with Hard Target, which kind of failed, but Hollywood came back to him and gave him Broken Arrow and Mission Impossible 2, as Byrd was saying. And then it was just like open season where they tried to bring over all these guys. And I always wonder with Big Hit if I think they maybe thought Kirk Wong was like a huge, like one of those big action directors. Although I think he was actually known more for dramatic kind of crime dramas.
Yeah, he was. And it's kind of funny too, because like I want to say what it seemed like was going on. The reason Hollywood was like giving the Hong Kong people such a chance was like the big name stars, like we said, had fizzled out. And like, whereas now I feel like Hollywood, if something isn't making money, they just drop the genre completely. I think they were really like looking for the Hong Kong directors and even some of the stars to come over to kind of reinvigorate, because these were such easy bets. Like a lot of these films were made for, I mean, this particular movie is like a really low budget movie. But like action movies were just always such a great return on investments. A lot of them, they spend $20 million on them or less, and they would always gross 2-3 times the budget. So Hollywood, like, whereas now they just run to where the money is. Like back then, I felt like they were trying to like kind of give the action genre a shot in the arm with all this overseas talent coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only other movie I've seen from this director is Crime Story, starring Jackie Chan, which is actually not so much a martial arts kind of movie. It's much more of a dramatic movie. I remember that's the first Jackie Chan movie I watched and thought like, oh, wow, he can actually act.
Yeah, that's a great movie.
So let's talk a little...
I've never seen any of his other work.
Yeah, let's talk a little more about what's actually going on here. Is the team of guys who, if we didn't run it down before, it's Lou Diamond Phillips, Antonio Sambato Jr., Bokeem Woodbine, and a very young Mark Wahlberg. They're basically posing as, I guess, some type of construction workers, and they're infiltrating this kind of old-timey hotel to take out a very, like, stereotypical mob boss. And here you have, like, a very, like, they cut the power. And by the way, Bokeem cut the power. Even though he could have just flipped the switches off, he had, like a pair of bolt cutters.
Bolt cutters.
And if you notice, the bolt cutters, like, the blades, like, they were nowhere near as big enough as those big metal coils he was trying to cut.
Yeah, they couldn't even get around them. Yeah.
Like, they didn't even get a shot of him ready to cut them. He was just kind of...
This is also when every action movie someone gets shot with a pistol and like fly through a wall.
Right.
Well, so that's the Hong Kong thing, right? So we talk about what was the Hong Kong influence that came over. It was like this hyper stylization.
Oh, look how 90s this is.
Yeah.
Oh, with the like blur lines.
Yeah.
In a moment, he's gonna like start like right here, like doing just nonsensical flips in the air and breakdancing and
breakdance shooting.
He's literally breakdancing. But this is the Hong Kong style. I mean, there are some Hong Kong action films that are very serious and grim and kind of more realistically violent. But John Woo kind of got the thing of like his movies were like a ballet, and some of the other Hong Kong movies were and weren't. But like there definitely was a more physicality to it with more like kind of grace and like so like even though like it looks ridiculous to us that Mark Wahlberg is basically breakdance shooting. Like I'm sure like nobody in Hong Kong like would have watched that and thought it was strange.
Well, that's what they called John Woo's style back then was bullet ballet.
Exactly.
I remember, and it's almost hard to think of a time when this was like novel in Hollywood because really this hasn't ever gone away. I mean, you look at something like John Wick, and that's still kind of the prevalent. This like overly choreographed action scenes. That's still what we like, but it really came in like the mid '90s here.
You're right.
I remember that non-dairy creamer line was in all the commercials.
Yeah. Yeah, because basically the gig here is that the other guys are lazy and they always hang back, either lazy or scared. I mean, it's hard to say which. And they always let, and we'll get into a little more, Mark Wahlberg plays Melvin Smiley, and he kind of lets everybody walk all over himself. So he's kind of like a savant when it comes to killing, though. Like, he's a badass action killer,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like it's like Trev said, he's very mild-mannered. He lets everyone walk all over him. He lets, his girlfriend and her parents walk all over him. He lets his side girl walk all over him. He gets really bad anxiety, and there'll be plenty of shots of him drinking like Maalox or whatever.
Yeah, because he's got an ulcer.
Yeah, but yeah, he is just the best killer. I mean, he just killed like 30 guys by himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just good at it.
And I thought
Antonio Sabato Jr. is kind of the typical cipher. I feel like he always is in this film, but I definitely want to consistently through this movie talk about how awesome Lou Diamond Phillips is in this.
Well, and Antonio Sabato Jr. for all of his prominence on the posters and in the advertisements, he's really not in this movie after this. But no, Lou Diamond Phillips is just wonderful in this, and I mean, this was a big role for him at this point, I think, because he was kind of not doing much around the time this movie came out.
Yeah, he's on a lot of DTV, and then there was a
hello, Bats. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I just
well, this and Bats was kind of him knocking back on the Hollywood door, and we should say this was at a time when low budget pictures still could get a wide release. There, like this was from a major studio, but there was like Destination Films and a few others that were putting these mid budget movies like into theaters back then. But when I saw this movie, I thought for sure this was going to be a big Lou Diamond comeback, and it never kind of really materialized.
Yeah, I remember when movies like this came out, like, it seemed like every week. These kinds of action movies don't really happen anymore. I feel like it's always just kind of the, you killed my family, revenge, like the Liam Neeson movies. That's all.
Well, I think the like modern equivalent of this is like the Luc Besson kind of Factory, which is like those just kind of smaller budgeted action films. But yeah, they're not maybe as irreverent as this one is.
No, yeah, this one, and we should talk a little bit about this. There's a little bit more action, but I want to get a little more even deeper than we've already talked about kind of the behind the scenes people behind this, because this is like. And we'll get into it in a second, but this is like the ultimate Hollywood diversity in terms of behind the camera, behind the scenes. But what do you guys think about Mark Wahlberg when he actually like offs the mafia guy? We finally get like a little moment of him being like a cold killer. Like, what do you think about Mark Wahlberg's character in general? I mean, we'll kind of when he interacts with the women later, we'll get into it more. But what do you think?
All I can really think about is those Kevin Smith jorts he's wearing.
Yeah, those were pretty awesome.
I think he's kind of a typical good guy in the wrong place kind of character. Even though he kills, he cheats on his girlfriend and all that, but he's. Yeah, he doesn't strike me as a cold.
I mean, at the time, obviously I was much younger when I watched this movie originally and became a fan of this movie. But at the time, I really didn't think much about it. I just thought, oh, he's a cool action guy. But if you were to analyze it by movie standards now, he's definitely, like, no ifs, ands, or buts. He's definitely a sociopath.
Look at this shot.
Yeah. I actually think this is some very good... I don't know
That's
if you know...
That's pretty cool. The reflection in the pool is pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's really more compositing work than it is CGI, honestly. But compared to the green screen stuff you see now, I think this actually looks a lot better. Like you can tell it's an effect when you look at it because the shots and what are intentionally over the top. But I thought it was pretty damn good, especially for this is a lower budget movie.
Hey Trev, the screenwriter Ben Ramsey, you know what movie he directed?
I thought the only other movie he was involved in was the Dragon Ball Evolution, wasn't it?
No, he directed Blood and Bone with Michael Jai White.
Oh, all right. Well, good on him. That movie's awesome.
Yeah, this was Ben Ramsey's first screenplay. He had done like a lot of production stuff, so this was kind of like the thing that kind of got him to start in terms of moving up from being like a production assistant and like I believe he's a production assistant on Silence of the Lambs, and then he did some other like behind the scenes work on other movies. But this was like the first time he, was a major creative part in something. But and I want to say, even though I don't know it's been a while since I listened to the commentary, but obviously we know Terrence Chang, John Woo were producers of this movie. Kirk Wong was the director.
Wesley Snipes is
Amen-Ra Films, which really weren't around for very long, but so Wesley Snipes, and obviously I found it very interesting that you kind of had Wesley Snipes' production company, a young at the time black screenwriter, kind of teaming up with these Chinese guys from Hong Kong to kind of make the and then with an American mostly cast. Like, I mean, they talk a lot about now how we need a lot of more diverse voices behind the scenes of films, but I think in a way like this, because I can't think of any other movie that really had such international co-production stuff going on as this movie did. We saw real quick Avery Brooks, who a lot of people know as I think Mr. Falcon, and then also from Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I always thought he did a great job as the crime boss with his deep-ass voice.
Looking at some trivia, the role of Melvin was originally written for Martin Lawrence.
Interesting.
Huh.
This movie would have been unbearable with Martin Lawrence.
Yeah.
I think most people would know Avery Brooks from American History X.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like more people probably know him from Star Trek.
Yeah, I always know him from Star Trek.
Okay. I meant more like average people.
Okay.
might recognize, they might see him and go, who is that guy? Who is that guy? And then you might look him up and say, oh, he's the teacher in American History X.
No, I always thought this was funny. Like, you have the joke where, Melvin Smiley pulls into the wrong driveway because he lives in, like, this kind of generic suburb where all the houses look the same. But he pulls into his driveway, and, of course, behind, like, the power tool wall and stuff, he has this whole hidden arsenal. But he put that whole arsenal of guns back in there with his garage door completely wide open. So anybody walking by would totally see his arsenal of guns right there.
We're getting the best subplot of the movie right now. This is Big Top Video. You've had our copy of King Kong Lives for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think really there's, even up to this point, we're 10, 15 minutes in, even up to this point, we've seen a lot of comedy already, but I think just randomly you get this phone call from this annoying, harassing video store clerk. I think that really is kind of the sign of how deep this comedy is going to go and how absurd it's going to get, moving forward.
Here we have the first appearance of Christina Applegate as his regular girlfriend.
Asks him to squeeze her butt.
Right.
This was an interesting point in her career too, I think. Well, I mean, it's like at this point, she was definitely known because of Married with Children and Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, but I don't think people had quite accepted her as an actual comedic star yet, as she would become later, I feel like. I mean, I think like Anchorman really helped her with that. So,
yeah,
I think it's just she's just there to be like kind of a sex symbol, but then you see in this that, oh yeah, she's already kind of working on, the goofy Jewish thing she's doing here and everything, and showing a little more chops than just being the dumb girl, which is all she was known for a while.
Yeah, I was a huge fan of hers when I was a kid, obviously, and I think this is actually one of her best roles in terms of showing how actually like versatile and later on. She seems like one of those people that Hollywood never used right. I feel like she should, like, still today she should be a bigger star than she is. Yeah, she had a couple stabs at sitcoms that didn't go over, like where she was starring later on. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I just think she's a lot more comedically, Speaking of, just out of curiosity, because I've literally caught it on cable, I think twice in like the last year and a half. Any fans here of Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead?
Yeah. I probably haven't seen it since the 90s, but sure.
Yeah.
I remember like for real, obviously, because I was such a fan of hers at the time and I was young, but I remember like being jacked for that movie in theaters. Like I could not wait, for months and months, and kind of just saw it. And at the time, I think I could, because I was a young boy, I could only focus on her in it. But later on, obviously watching it now, I think it's actually one of the better kind of teen flicks.
Is my memory right?
90s.
Is her romantic interest in that a young Josh Charles?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a very good, because it's about. It's also different too, because it's about a teenage girl trying to blend into an adult workplace. So it's like a little bit different. It's not really. It is a wacky teen comedy, but it's not as generic as you probably would think it would be. You know what I mean? And what,
you always think Christina Applegate. Like I always think she's gonna have her moment. Like she always seems to have like a moment where I think, oh, she's gonna get maybe a little bit bigger after this, and then it just kind of never happens. And especially I thought like Anchorman would be for sure that, that like springboard for her, and it just kind of never really happened.
I know. No, we've had a few glimpses of it, but let's talk about some Mark Wahlberg tattoos. I believe these were his real tattoos. I believe at the time, I think on his left arm is a weird kind of cartoonish character of Bob Marley. And then on his chest is like this weird like necklace, which I've noticed that weird necklace on him in other movies too, but now you never see it. I think he's had all these bad tattoos since Lasered Off. I didn't know if anybody had paid attention to that or not.
No.
No, I hadn't noticed.
Yeah, it's just he's so shirtless in this movie.
Isn't that like his thing in every movie, kind of?
Even though obviously he's still in great shape and he's still pumped up, I feel like they don't showcase him like in that way as much anymore. But he just kind of plays more like a brawny meathead in general now.
Well, I mean, in in Pain and Gain, he certainly was.
Yeah.
But that was that whole movie was just about that. So
yeah, but I mean, I'm talking about this time. Obviously, I want to say
we're even a few years removed from that. So yeah.
I want to say the movie Fear, he was shirtless quite a bit. Obviously Boogie Nights, because he's playing a porn actor. This movie is like really like the most like he's just always shirtless for no reason whatsoever.
I love the name of this movie.
Taste the Golden Spray. Yeah.
Yeah. We're now introduced to Hiro Nishi, the Japanese industrialist who actually turned filmmaker and put himself into the biggest Hollywood movie of all time. Taste the Golden Spray, which we got to explain to people who maybe haven't seen this movie. This man is clearly a Japanese gentleman, probably in his late 50s, and he made a huge, like, romantic, whatever, epic, So
looks like a Bond movie, maybe, like with a name like that. Taste the Golden Spray, and then what he spent like all his money on the marketing actually is like everything is made out of actual gold for the marketing of the movie, and
it's kind of interesting there too. I wonder. I don't think they really cross the line too much with making fun of Nishi, but he is Japanese, and it is interesting that the creative people behind this movie were I guess technically Chinese. They're from Hong Kong, but. So I wonder, I think they probably could have gone more caricature and gone, stereotypical or whatever. And I guess it is kind of stereotypical, but I think you could have got away with a lot more in '98 than they did. So I think they held some restraint in making fun of him.
Yeah, I wonder if that came down from somewhere, because in the original script, his daughter was supposed to be a high school student instead of a college student, and obviously that was changed to making her a college student. They the studio thought it was maybe a little too risque to all the things that end up happening with her and her character and Melvin to have her be a high school girl, but it was supposed to be like an homage to high school girls always appearing as anime in cartoons in Japan. So
yeah, I always wondered about that because it's kind of unclear. I never knew for sure, not if she was in high school or college, but she
says she's doing her research in something that kind of tips it off.
Yeah, but she's clearly whatever school she's at. both the guys and girls, they seem to be wearing like Catholic schoolboy school honor uniforms. I mean, am I right or what? Now, I think this is almost like a flawed plan, because their plan was to kidnap the limo driver so they could, well, not kidnap the limo driver, but take the limo driver, because Cisco clearly just shoots him right there. But their whole plan was they had their car broken down, fake broken down on the side of the road, so that when the limo driver rode by, he would stop. But how did they know the limo driver would want to stop and help them? That's like the only plot hole in this entire movie, really.
I'm sure there's more.
Because when I sat down and watched this the other day, like I was expecting, and I've seen this movie 20 times or more, but I haven't seen it in the last few years. I was really expecting them to like flag the guy down, but Melvin and Cisco are just arguing in the street, and he totally drives by, but then stops and backs up, and I don't know, just weird.
Yeah, this looks like a high school, but it's supposed to be a college, I guess. They probably just held over the uniforms. Either the high school thing was rewritten at the last minute, or the director still wanted to get that feel for it, but was forced to at least say she was in college.
I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead, Trev.
What I think is funny is that this is actually the Mark Wahlberg's direct follow-up to Boogie Nights.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I just love that coming off of Boogie Nights, this is the script he read and was like, this is the next one, man.
Well, he is Marky Mark. Yeah.
It was a rough cut, because then he followed this up with The Corruptor, which is, again, in that Hong Kong vein, because it pairs him up with Chow Yun-fat, who Hollywood was very intent on making a thing after he was like the breakout star of the John Woo's Hong Kong films. And I feel like The Corruptor didn't really take off either, but then in 1999, Mark Wahlberg really came back in a big way with Three Kings. So,
yeah.
And that's China Chow playing the girl who was never really... I don't think she really went anywhere after this.
Yeah, I mean, I know she kept like working, but in terms of the stuff I've seen, the only thing I can think of, she has like literally like a 1-minute cameo in the movie Spun. Any of you guys ever see that movie Spun about the meth?
I think you could even call it a cameo if, like, when it's like a not famous person.
Yeah, but
it's like if I popped up in a movie, it wouldn't be a cameo. I would just be,
he would be. Well, I'm trying to be nice, because she's really good. Because at the end of the credits, they say introducing China Chow. So I'm guessing this was their first, feature film.
Well, I mean, because we talked about this movie having its 20-year anniversary, if you guys want to feel old again, China Chow is 43 now. So
yeah. I was gonna say,
this scene gets a little me love you long time.
Yeah,
sucky.
I was gonna say, hashtag time was definitely not up at this point in time of our cinematic history. But again, I think it's all a setup with her boyfriend near raping her in the back of the limo, and then Mark Wahlberg immediately shoots him. And I think this is kind of the way this plays out. I mean, obviously her boyfriend was a jerk or whatever, but the way eventually her and Mark Wahlberg kind of hit it off, even though he is the murderer of her boyfriend, I think that kind of, you just have to kind of roll with it in this movie, because this is almost... Like, there's a lot of elements of this film that remind me of, like, kind of the realities and minutia that you would find in a very poppy 90s comic book film, even though this obviously is not based on a comic book.
Can we talk about Gump for a minute?
Yeah, please do. I like him a lot.
Yeah, Gump is actually, I think, one of my favorite characters.
I love the line China Chow says, "What are you guys supposed to be, the Spice Boys?" Because they all have like different colored outfits on, and I kind of feel
that was also in all the commercials.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that was almost like an intentional theme with the crew of. I mean, Gump's kind of just like a side character who comes in, but as far as the main 4 hitman guys, I feel like they all kind of were like almost assembled like a boy band. And they all have their different colors. Like Cisco definitely has his like maroon, purplish color palette that he always works in. Mark Wahlberg always dresses, it seems like, mostly in either yellows or greens.
His hairstyle was definitely worn by a lot of members of like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys around this time.
Yeah.
I think the problem with like the Lou Diamond Phillips thing we were talking about earlier is just like you watch this and he's so good, and you realize he never really got to play characters like this. I mean, like he's always almost like in everything you could think of with him, it's always like a stoic kind of,
Right.
yeah, character, and
So he's
like
a
then you
cop
see how
or something.
then you see how funny he can be, and it's too bad more people didn't kind of try to capitalize on that with him.
Because even these days, he's still active, but he appears in
Yeah.
all those movies that are like, you know, like the Strong and the Brave and the 33 and you know like those kinds of movies, and he's just that like just like the stoic, or sometimes occasionally they let him be like the heart of the group or something, but he doesn't really get to like act much. You know? Like,
he shows up in TV shows as like the serious dad, you know.
Yeah, he doesn't get to be like as boisterous as he is in this. So,
and going back to the strength of the script right here, I think this is another great example of what this movie does. You know, and I actually went back and read some reviews that came out about this movie the other day that were negative, and I just found it so funny because so much of it at the time, like, critics were saying this was just a Tarantino ripoff and all that, and I thought that was weird because there's always been movies about hitmen, crime, underworld, everything, but in the 90s, if you made one after, like, Pulp Fiction, they always said you were a Tarantino ripoff, whereas I think, like, the scene we just had with China Chow and, you know, kind of the comedy that's coming out of, you know, her reading the very poorly written ransom note and whatever into the tape recorder. I think the strength of this movie is it takes a lot of scenes that you've kind of seen in a lot of other movies, and it kind of turns it on its head and gives it a comedic twist. So I really don't think there's any part of this movie that was aping Tarantino whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, there was a definite rash of Tarantino ripoffs at this point. You know, like Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead and 2 Days in the Valley. This does not fit into that camp at all, I don't think.
I have a quote here from Roger Ebert. Says, "I guess you could laugh at this. You would have to be seriously alienated from normal human values and be nursing a deep-seated anger against movies that make you think even a little. But you could laugh at this."
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you know who they originally had in mind to play Pam?
Who?
Debbie Mazar.
Interesting.
Who I think
She
most
actually would've
people
been
would
great.
know from.
You can see how she would be great in the role.
Yeah. You might know her from, if you're listening, from Goodfellas. She plays Henry Hill's side girl.
I mean, of course, you might also know her as one of Two-Face's henchmen in Batman Forever.
Yeah, along with Drew Barrymore.
Yeah.
She's Spice, right? Because Drew Barrymore Sugar.
Yeah, Sugar.
Yeah.
Yep. She's the one who makes them, like, she's got like the pig like roasting on a spit, like in
Yeah.
And that here you have her very stereotypical kind of waspy Jewish parents.
I love Elliot Gould in this so much.
I do too. He really makes it. Yeah, like we're set up. You know, we're kind of introduced here to Pam's like super. I guess really more her mom than her dad, but they're her super Jewish parents, and like they're kind of, you know, a lot of the comedy gets derived from they don't approve of Melvin, you know, not being a Jewish guy, but obviously, you know, Pam is more with him because he's providing like good money or whatever. But let's slow this down. Let's talk about
King Kong Lives.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about Melvin's side girlfriend here, the awesome, I always thought was underrated, Leela Rashawn. And it's, I guess, if we're going to speak in 2018 terms, you know, Melvin with Pam, he kind of just kisses her ass and always tries to take her, you know, make her happy or whatever. But with his side girlfriend, she's really much more demanding, almost to the point that I think a lot of people would watch. If, say, this movie came out right now, there'd be a lot of gentlemen that would call Melvin a cuck. What do you guys think? What do you guys think about, first of that, Melvin is definitely posited as not only the good guy in this movie, but probably the best moralistic person in this entire movie, but yet he cheats on his fiancée. Really, both his fiance and his mistress are both really gold diggers who demand money from him nonstop. But like, what do you? And then obviously, for people who've seen this movie, you know, eventually there's kind of a romance. Well, there is a romance that develops between him and a third woman, the high school / college student China Chow. Just for a second, what do you guys think of the kind of morality of him being involved with so many women in the movie, but yet still being the good guy of the story?
Well, it's that old Hollywood trick, right, of where the morality is all over the map, but you're forgiving of it as long as everyone else around him is even worse.
Yeah, this movie plays it so differently too, though. with it's just weird. I feel like in a typical Hollywood movie, that aspect of it would almost be played up more, and Melvin would have to like get redemption or something in order for us to really like him. But this movie's just pretty comfortable with just playing it. That's the way it is. And yeah, everyone else is just worse than him, so we end up rooting for him.
I love that Jiro Nishi was going to kill himself, but was still willing to answer the phone when it rang.
Exactly. He was literally singing a traditional song, ready to commit traditional, I guess, Harry Carey by, disemboweling himself with a knife. And then obviously Cisco, played by Lou Diamond Phillips, and Gump call to try to, demand the ransom and whatnot. Now,
of course, we talked over the amazing explanation too of the Trace Buster, which is a great
and the Trace Buster.
Yeah. Because Gump is using a trace buster, which is supposedly, that was always a big thing in movies back then about tracing phone calls. And again, just like the ransom note seating, I think this is, kind of this movie gets underpraised in terms of things that, you traditionally see in these movies that gets turned on its head. But Nishi, his company actually is the one who makes the trace buster. So he's got like, he's got, well, I guess it plays off different in a later scene, but he'll bust the trace buster bust, but we'll see.
I don't know.
I do have a quick correction though. Goat, you called it Harry Carey.
Okay.
The announcer for the Cubs. I'm
sorry. What is the traditional Japanese suicide?
Seppuku.
Oh, I'm sorry, Heppuku. But
Seppuku.
Seppuku, yeah.
Well, Harakiri is an accurate alternative to that, but most people I don't think say Harry Carey.
Okay, I said Harry Carey.
I was gonna say, am I the only one that did see this in theaters? I don't remember if you.
No, I saw it opening weekend as well. Yeah,
I would always go with my dad to the movies, and he was off Wednesdays and Thursdays, so I definitely saw this the Wednesday after it came out. So.
Well, I remember, and I think I've told Byrd this, but I remember when this came out, because this came out around the same time that Replacement Killers came out.
Right.
And I said I was really big in that Hong Kong action stuff at the time. I was getting all those. You probably remember Tay Sing, the company that put out all those Hong Kong films on VHS, and I was buying those all the time. And
yeah.
And I was all in for the Hong Kong style coming over here. And obviously I was super excited for Replacement Killers, because I was like, oh man, Chow Yun-fat, I can't wait for everyone to see in America how awesome this guy is. And this one was more of like a novelty for me. I was like, yeah, I guess maybe this will be okay. And then Replacement Killers really wasn't very good. It was kind of a disappointment.
I saw that in theaters too.
And this one ended up feeling to me like, I was like, oh, even though this is goofy, this one felt more like a Hong Kong film to me, just because of the stylization and how crazy it was.
I did not see this in theaters.
How do you discover this movie if you don't see it in theaters?
Yeah,
so,
I was wondering.
That's my question.
So that's I went to, this is now, because I have not even known about this movie for very long, maybe 2-3 years, honestly.
Wow.
We were at Fry's Electronics I was buying a bunch of movies, and my wife was just kind of browsing around too, and she happened by one of the discount bins and was picked up this movie and brought it over. She's like, hey, it's got Mark Wahlberg. We like him. And it's, it was $1.50 in the discount bin. And she's like, I want this. I want to watch this tonight. And I was like, okay, whatever. Did we say, I don't know if we said on this or if we said go right before we started recording, the cover of this looks like it's a movie like Snatch or Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. And, so I was expecting like a Guy Ritchie type of thing. And even at the start of it, I was like, oh, well, it's like a lower budget, maybe Guy Ritchie kind of thing. And then it started to get a little weird. And there's a scene coming up where it did finally click for me what was going on, but it took a bit. But but there's a scene and I'll mention it when it comes up, but where I was like, yes, okay, I get what's going on now, and I love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just a random oh, $1.50? Sure, I'll buy almost any movie for $1.50.
Well, I don't have these numbers in front of me, and I'm sure they're probably impossible to find now. But I'm willing to bet that this movie probably had a pretty healthy video life because this came on this is right at the beginning of DVD, as evidenced by the fact that all the video store stuff in the movie is about VHS.
Right.
But this is right when DVD was hitting, and I mean, this is probably, I'm sure this is the kind of film that probably got rented quite a bit on that new release rack at video stores, because video stores were still the thing back then.
Well, Trev, too, is I bet they made double of what they would have normally made, because like you said, I bet many video stores, and I worked at a video store during the transitionary time between VHS and DVD, but it's almost like you had to buy double copies because you had to buy the VHS and the DVD. Mm-hmm. So I bet they made out like bandits on this. And speaking of home video, this was I couldn't wait for this movie to come out. I don't know if it's just the theater I normally went to or what, but I saw the trailer for this for months. I couldn't wait for it. So to me, it was like this huge movie, even though it really wasn't. I think worldwide or maybe domestically, it only grossed maybe about $22-23 million. But I couldn't wait for this fucking thing to come out. And I distinctly remember, because it was around the time I got a DVD player, within 6 months of I got a DVD player, I distinctly remember buying the first DVD that was released of it for back when new release movies on DVD were $24.99. And I gladly paid $24.99 for this on at Best Buy and watched the shit out of the DVD. Later, there was the Superbit DVD. Oh, gotta have that. That was another $25. And then, way after that, probably whatever it was, 6 or 7 years after this movie came out, I got the sickness of buying movies for my Sony PSP, which no longer works. So I do have a PSP copy of The Big Hit. And then finally the Blu-ray. So I've literally bought this movie, 4 times on home video. And so, I mean, just doing quick math right there, I've spent at least probably $75 on this movie on home video. And
I had a VHS, and then I actually bought the Blu-ray specifically to do this.
Yeah, you did. I appreciate that, Bert.
Yeah. I mean, when I was younger, when I was a teenager and I had this on tape, it is one of those movies I watched a lot.
I mean, I just remember watching it all the time, literally, and obviously when I was younger and then whether I was a student or just whatever I was at the time, I wasn't working 40 hours a week, obviously, so I had a lot more free time, and I would just especially the early days of DVD, and I don't know if this was it for you guys when you guys first started collecting movies on DVD, but it was when that sweet spot of when you only had maybe about 50 movies in your collection. Would you guys rewatch the same movies 3 or 4 times a year?
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, man, I exactly remember that, watching that's what some of the movies that are burned into my head as favorites. The Fifth Element is another one like that I just watched all the time because it's what I had.
Yeah,
there was a time where I watched the first 4 or 5 seasons of The Simpsons just over and over and over and over because it was some of the only DVDs that I had back when I was in college. And I carried my DVDs around in a couple of Tupperware bins.
Wow.
For me, I did that a lot with VHS. There's certain Godzilla movies, and I used to tape The Simpsons off TV, and I would just whatever that episode was that week, I'd watch maybe 2 or 3 times that week. That's just, I don't know. That now there's too much stuff that you can always watch.
Oh, I was gonna say,
that is. I'm sure you guys have done the same thing where you want to watch something, but between streaming and your own collections, by the time you pick something to watch, it's you could have watched something. It's time to go, and it's time to go to bed or something, and you're oh well, I guess I'm not watching anything.
Even before Blu-ray, when it had gotten to the point where I had 400 DVDs, I would spend an hour and a half trying to pick something out what to watch. It'd be a Sunday night. This would always happen to me because I wouldn't, I'd want to have a little bit more weekend before you go back to work. And I'd sit there for an hour, hour and a half, picking between all my DVDs. I finally get something, and then it would get to the point where oh, it's getting so late, I can't even watch a long movie now. You ever do that too, where you're searching your DVDs or whatever for a 90
it's what can I watch this an hour and 20 minutes or
So you end up almost spending as much the equal time watching something as you were looking for something. No, it got real cartoony there for a second because now this is, we should say this movie, like, it throws up, like, it kind of breaks up the narrative by, the different days of the week. So now it's Saturday, and it kind of pokes fun at suburban life. There's literally, like, a choreographed shot of, like, 8 or 9 guys all coming out of their houses at the same time, mowing their lawns with the exact same lawnmower. And they all had electric lawnmowers, it seemed like. It seemed like all their lawnmowers had extension cord. Have you guys ever seen an electric lawnmower?
No, that seems like the worst idea.
Yeah.
But it's just also like that
I have
joke.
electric weed whacker.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. That joke, it's funny how many like films of this time period love to do that joke, like make fun of the suburbs. It's just strange that, at this point the suburbs have been around for a long time.
Yeah, this is almost the turn of the century. This is not 1950.
People still weren't over like making fun of that element.
Yeah, this is a kind of humor that you saw in Edward Scissorhands. Like, geez, how that was like way before this.
That was like 8 years before this.
Yeah.
We should also quickly point out, because this is the kind of thing that our listeners care about, I'm sure. The score for this film is done by Mr. Graham Revell.
Oh, yeah.
And let's face it, if you're watching a film from the late 90s or early 2000s, there's about an 85% chance you're hearing a score by Graham Revell. That guy was like all over the place back then.
And of course, there's usually a ska song sandwiched in there somewhere.
Yeah, there's for a Hong Kong director and some like Wesley Snipes production company. Like, there's a lot of weird, super white musical choices in this. Like, this was a time period where they were trying to push ska as being like so there's like a lot of Save Ferris and just weird ska songs thrown in the background. Or maybe it's just the director being a foreign guy. Maybe he was introduced to that music and he thought it sounded comical. I don't know, but
yeah. Or maybe he's like just doing what he thinks is like considered cool here.
Yeah. Now, what do you guys think? Like, to go back to just a second to Graham Revell, right? So here's a guy who, like, let me just read some of the films he's done. Right, like Child's Play 2, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, The Crush, Hard Target, The Crow, Tank Girl, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, From Dusk Till Dawn, The Craft, Spawn, The Idle Hands, Bride of Chucky. This is a guy who's done so many movies we all know and a lot of movies we love, and yet can anybody think of like a Graham Revell theme?
Well, he's talented because he makes different types of music for all. I would say my favorite stuff that he ever did was actually the From Dusk Till Dawn score, because it was pretty memorable in terms of the horror thing. We kind of like the last few minutes we're talking, there was like a lot of like where Mark Wahlberg was trying to hide the schoolgirl. He's pulling her in and out of rooms as Christina Applegate's walking in and out. Like, this was like almost some like really like old timey comedy here. What did you guys think about that? Of like the farce
a Scooby-Doo episode.
Yeah, it was like really old timey.
I love it. This is where the movie started to kind of win me over, just with like just how kind of campy and over the top and old timey the comedy was. It's got a, I don't know, it's got a very quaint, I guess, very familiar kind of quality about it to me.
Yeah. And it's just interesting to see it in a movie that is like literally about hitmen and a kidnapping. And I should say one thing, there was like a lot of weird kidnapping movies for a while. I want to say like in the late 90s, early 2000s, to the point where like I got tired of there just being kidnapping movies. But I have to say this is by far my favorite kidnapping movie of all time. Just because it has a lot of other elements in it too. It's not just all about a kidnapping, obviously, but
I've never heard anyone say this is my favorite kidnapping movie of all time.
There's always a first for everything on the movie.
I mean, if that's a genre, I guess I would say like Ransom.
Yeah.
High and Low.
The rare actually good Ron Howard movie.
I agree with that. I actually saw Ransom, just a random memory coming back to me, but I actually saw Ransom in a theater where the aspect ratio wasn't properly set up. So I was like, you ever have this happen to you where they don't have it set up the right way? This don't happen anymore now with digital stuff, but when there's film prints, they would have to kind of center the frame on the screen a certain way. So, like, I saw Ransom, like, all fucked up. So, like, I just literally saw the boom mic over and over. And, like, at the time, I didn't really understand it was because the projection was fucked up. So, I really thought Ron Howard made a movie where, like, 40% of the time you could just see the boom mic. Like, I criticized the shit out of it for a while until I read up.
There we go. I got Trace Buster for their ass.
Yeah, Ishii actually has Nishi, I should say. Nishi has like 3 or 4 trace busters, and like these things are busting the traces that they're trying to, because Gump only has like 1 trace buster that they bought at Radio Shack or whatever.
No, he's got the Trace Buster because he's got the. What if they have a Trace Buster? Oh, I've got the Trace Buster.
Yeah, there's like different models, but Nishi has them all lined up. Now, it's kind of like out of focus, but we kind of see in the foreground, we see Bokeem Woodbine's apartment here, and he's picking out a porno to jerk off to. Like, he just had a quick phone conversation with Mark Wahlberg there, but I kind of wanted to see more of his life. In a weird way, to see what other
really. I'm sure if you go on to like Pornhub or something, you can find exactly what he was doing.
Jelly said earlier to make you feel older. China Chow, who plays a schoolgirl, and this is now 43. But I was actually shocked when I was like, I don't know why. After watching this other night, I got curious about Bokeem Woodbine and his kind of mini Hollywood comeback he has going on. But I was actually shocked to find Bokeem Woodbine is only 44 years old right now. He was really in a lot of movies, like in his very early 20s.
He looks exactly the same.
Yeah, that's what's weird. I was thinking that too, because I was like, when I realized this movie was 20 years old, and I'm like, well, to me, other than he's kind of like a little bigger and beefier now, like when I watched this movie when I was like young, I thought all these guys were like super jacked, super pumped. But you look at them, I mean, they're all in great shape, but they're all like really like lean and skinny compared to like how guys are now. But I was just like, yeah. So like I really thought Bokeem Woodbine would be in his early 50s by now, and I saw he was only 44. I was like, well, good on him, man. I hope he has a little more bit of a run going on here in films, because I really liked him, and I really liked him in movies like Dead Presidents and just some of his early stuff he was in. And I think he's both good in dramatic and like kind of comedy or like, action type roles.
What do you guys overall think of Mark Wahlberg as an actor? Because I always, to me, he's one of the most confusing big stars in the world, because I don't know if I can think of anyone at his level of fame who's got a more like lopsided ratio. Sometimes he's really good and sometimes embarrassingly bad in movies.
He's mostly bad.
I wouldn't say
sometimes he's good.
I don't know. I actually think it's more 50-50.
I think it's, Trev, I think it's more his choice of materials that stops him from doing good work. And I think maybe the worst thing, because I mean, I remember when he started, like, I didn't want to give him the time of day, because, like, oh, fucking Marky Mark's going to be an actor. And I saw him in the movie Fear, and I was like, he still was kind of Marky Marking out, but I was like, oh, yeah, he's not bad. And it really was obviously Boogie Nights, where I was like, okay, he can be a real actor. I liked Boogie Nights at the time for what it was, but the first movie that, like, really I ever liked, like, the movie a lot, and I liked him in it, was this. And after this, like, I pretty much had an open mind, and for a while I really liked some of the stuff he was doing, because like we said before, he did The Corruptor and The Three Kings after this. But yeah, like, now it's and I've seen the majority of his movies. The only one I think I really haven't seen is the Oil Rig movie and Patriots Day, which I do want to see both those. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But like, yeah, I don't know, it just... Like I feel like
he's become a lot more lazy in recent years. I feel like he actually had a run there for a while where he was really trying and being mostly good and everything, and then just kind of, I don't know. Yeah, once he became maybe a star, he kind of just started coasting a little bit.
Right, I agree with that. I think the worst thing that happened to him.
I mean, you had like the other guys, The Fighter, even the first Ted and Pain and Gain. I felt like he was trying, and then you get into like Transformers and The Gambler and Entourage and Ted 2 and Daddy's Home and Deepwater Horizon. It's like, feels like he just wants to, and he's not even bad in any of these movies necessarily. It's just he's just boring. He like just wants to get paid, and yeah, like I think he's mostly fine. But there was a period of time where like coming off of that Other Guys and Pain and Gain run, I'd have been really excited for the next Mark Wahlberg movie, and now I'm like, oh, there's a Mark Wahlberg movie.
Well, even before that, you think about he was doing stuff like I Heart Huckabees or The Lovely Bones. He was like picking interesting movies to be in,
right? And
it doesn't feel like he's willing to do that anymore.
Yeah,
I am confused by his Oscar nomination for The Departed.
Why? He was great in it.
I was he?
Yeah, I think so. I was totally down for when they were floating that idea of his character getting a sequel.
Oh, yeah.
I was in for that.
I like him in it, but it's just it's not really much of a performance, I guess.
Well, I was just surprised of his nomination because in my mind, when I saw the movie or whatever, I just thought he was like barely in it. You know what I mean? Like I thought he was such a minor character.
I mean, it's just they picked him as the best supporting over, Jack Nicholson.
Another movie, another like early role, because obviously early on he, I think Big Hit was probably his first like pop movie where he was really doing a movie just for fun. But early on, another movie I was really impressed with his performance was I really liked him in The Basketball Diaries. Did any of you guys ever see that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was really good in that as well. So that's maybe another movie I think is very underrated for its time. Like, I enjoyed it a lot when I remember I saw it when it came out. I enjoyed it a lot at the time, but now that I look back on it and there's a lot less movies like that being made, I like that movie quite a bit.
Well, Basketball Diaries was a big deal when it came out.
Yeah.
And Leo Fever was starting to hit. Now I feel like nobody really even remembers it.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about Three Kings. I feel like that's been unfortunately kind of forgotten.
Right.
It was a big deal at the time, and I just feel like it's kind of, floated out of the ether for some reason, which is too bad. It's a great movie. Yeah,
I actually caught it a couple times on cable in the last couple of years, and it's just infinitely watchable when you come across it.
Mm-hmm.
Now here we have Cisco's on the hunt to find the kidnappers, even though he literally is the kidnapper. We got to talk about the fact that Gump lives like in an airplane hangar or something, like just filled with like I love it. I almost want to live in an airplane hangar myself. But he has like a little corner. He's watching TV and rap videos, and then Cisco.
He's got one of those like little Coca-Cola coolers that are like at the front of a grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
And do white people still wear Kangol hats to try and look cool?
Tarantino does, I think.
Kango is one thing that's kind of ever since like after Jackie Brown. I think Kango's kind of fallen off because I don't even see that many black people wearing Kango hats anymore. Do you guys?
I mean, as long as Samuel L. Jackson's around, they'll be in business.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, I almost think Lou Diamond Phillips could have fit into a Tarantino movie in the 90s, but
I feel like Lou Diamond Phillips now would be like someone Tarantino would go for.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, like I feel like Tarantino, like even though he still uses some people and like older people in his movies, he uses them in like super small parts now to where nobody really gets like the comeback vibe the way like Travolta.
Well, it kind of seems like he got like he used the old people he wanted to use, and now he doesn't seem as interested in that. I feel like now, especially as he thinks his career is winding down, because now we hear about him talking like Tom Cruise and stuff. I feel like he wants to use the big stars that he hasn't worked with yet.
Yeah. I think the only and I know you guys don't like a lot of his movies, which is fine, but I think the only person that still like kind of has a boner for using old people is maybe Rob Zombie, even though he didn't really use them in his last movie.
No, Zombie. Well, Christopher Nolan even. He always has kind of like an old B-movie actor in there somewhere.
Yeah, a lot of people forget he put Anthony Michael Hall in The Dark Knight, I think it was.
Yeah, and Tom Berenger in Inception and
Eric Roberts.
And William Devane showed up as the president in The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah. Now here we have where the schoolgirl and Mark Wahlberg start to hit it off.
This is the scene.
Yeah. The very disturbing scene.
The scene that won me over on this movie.
Yeah.
All of Jelly's schoolgirl fantasies.
Yeah. I have to admit, I don't know. I don't know like if it's just the uniform or what, but I have to admit that like ever since I've seen this movie, I always thought China Chow was pretty awesome. Like, and I just don't know why it was she didn't do any more. I'm just going to chalk it up to late 90s, early 2000s Hollywood racism, that she didn't have more of a career. Because I think for an introducing role, I think she she kind of hit it out of the park here. But please, somebody, let's talk about this cooking scene here.
It is the weirdest.
Yes.
Like foreplay scene in a movie of all time.
but they don't even have sex, but it is totally a foreplay buildup. And like, again, I just don't think the likability now you could get away with this of a guy two-timing his fiance, and now at this point now he's got literally a schoolgirl that he's,
Yeah, it's hard to describe what they're doing here, but
wow.
yeah, this is the scene where this movie gets like just this is the scene where it kind of goes off the rails in like the best possible way.
Yeah.
I mean, from here on, there's just all kinds of crazy scenes throughout the rest of the movie. But yeah, it's just, I mean, having a sensual stuffing of a turkey is like, look at him jam that stuffing in there.
Yeah.
Why are they massaging it?
Yeah, I was just shocked to look at IMDb right now and realize China Chow only has 10 acting credits, and one of those.
Well, I was going to say you were like saying she didn't go anywhere, but she did appear in Frankenfish.
Yeah.
Hold on. I have her Wikipedia up, and maybe I'm dumb, but okay. So the first two sentences of this paragraph, and the second sentence I don't understand. Chow made her acting debut in 1998, starring opposite Mark Wahlberg in The Big Hit. In 2004, she was shot by a house in Frankenfish.
What?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Didn't you, Bert? Haven't you seen Frankenfish?
No.
Oh, am I the only one who's seen Frankenfish?
I
She
haven't
was shot
seen
by a
Frankenfish.
house?
It's a house explodes and like propels like a tank or something into her. But
What kind of sentence is that? What kind of description is that? She was shot by a house?
well, if you click into it, the Wikipedia for Frankenfish, even in the plot description, it says, while everyone panics, Mary declares she has an idea on how to get off the boathouse. Before she can explain, she is shot by the house.
Shot by? I'm totally not.
It sounds like that's not even what really happened.
Yeah, shot by the house.
Bert, are you aware who wrote Frankenfish?
No.
Simon Barrett.
Oh man. Is it good?
Yeah, man, that was one of the like early, because that's like 2004. That was one of the early movies that really got the whole like Sci-Fi Channel original thing rolling, where people are like, "Oh man, these are becoming like events on Saturday nights now." I love Frankenfish.
So she gets killed in an explosion from like the house exploding. She doesn't get shot by the house.
Well, that's just another way to say it, I guess.
No, it's not.
That is no way that a person would say it.
Well, whoever wrote both the Wikipedia things.
No, the cooking scene, I guess I got to bring this up. They spill an amazing amount, what looks like Hershey's chocolate syrup on China Chow's legs. Mark Wahlberg hoists her up onto a table and slowly wipes it off. Like, what was that brown sauce supposed to be? Does anybody know? Because I could never figure out what it was.
I don't know. Is
supposed
it
to be.
some kind of gravy or?
It'd be like a soy sauce or a glaze of some kind. I mean,
Yeah, like I took it in the recipe. It was supposed to be some type of soy sauce or glaze, but I think what they probably used was more like chocolate sauce on her legs. But it just was so strange because they're supposed to be cooking a kosher meal or whatever. And now here, because he burned it up because she tried to escape and he had to tie her all up again, he got takeout food, and then now he's just going to pretend like he actually cooked this. I see this happen a lot in movies and TV shows. People get like takeout food and they try to convince people that they made it. Like, has anybody heard of this happening in real life?
By people, no. But I actually read an article about some restaurant, like a local restaurant, and I don't know, not here, but somewhere.
Yeah.
And it turned out that the fried chicken they were serving was just Popeye's chicken.
Yeah, I heard about that. Now here we have a great scene where...
Can we just go back 1 second? And
Yeah.
I need to ask Byrd a question. Byrd, if it wasn't here, then what makes it a local restaurant?
Well, it was local somewhere. I mean, it was like a mom and pop. It was like a mom and pop place. It wasn't
like a chain, is what he's saying.
Yeah.
No, yeah. I actually heard of that story, too. It was like 2 months ago, right, Byrd?
Yeah.
Now, here
we saw Crunch arguing and yelling at someone for the right lotion.
Yeah, because he's at the airport trying to get away, and he's trying to warn Mark Wahlberg that Cisco set them all up, and he's going to kill them all. And we should keep in mind that Antonio Sabato Jr. just disappeared for like 3/4 of the movie, so we never even see how he's reacting to the crisis of Cisco, throwing them all under the bus or the kidnapping. But yeah. Crunch, he's yelling at the guy. He doesn't want an aloe vera lotion. He needs something with lanolin in it, because I guess lanolin is better to jerk off with. I don't know.
I know. Well, I know it's what women use when they're breastfeeding.
Oh, okay.
Fun
sense.
fact for you there. So
No. Crunch says everyone should just give up their love life and masturbate.
Yeah. So literally the best Crunch line was real early in the movie, because all the hitmen, they know of Melvin's situation of his two women and how he's getting played by both of them. I think the best line was Crunch tells Mark Wahlberg, "Straight jackin' saves you that mad cream."
Is it a deleted scene where we see what Antonio Sabato's been up to? Because I have the memory of it, but I can't remember if it's in the film or not. Where we see that he's actually like cross dressing.
Because we don't.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I'm pretty sure it's a deleted scene because yeah. I can't remember if that's on the Blu-ray or not. It might be on the I know it's
on the DVD, because I definitely know it, so it's probably on this DVD.
Yeah, unless it's on there and it's just not listed. I'm looking at the back of the Blu-ray.
And again, the reason I know that is because this goes back to what you were saying, Goat. This is the period when you bought DVDs and all of them had deleted scenes, and you just watched them all because you're like, well, this is awesome. Deleted scenes, what's that? I don't know. How can you have deleted scenes? And now we just take that stuff for granted. And I don't even watch
deleted scenes.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, so many movies I've bought in the last few years, I just don't even bother watching those because I'm like, well, I guess they were deleted for a reason.
I know. Yeah, looking at the back of the Blu-ray, it looks like they just have the two commentary tracks that were on the DVD, but not any of the other special features.
Yeah, the DVD actually has some documentaries and other stuff.
Yeah. So I guess I have my DVD in a box somewhere in the garage. I guess I should dig that out sometime and check it out again.
Here's Elliot Gould going for it.
Yeah, I think this is great. We have all these hitmen that are claiming, Lou Diamond Phillips and a couple other hitmen, and they're all claiming that they're co-workers of Melvin. And all these guns are being pointed at each, everybody's pointing guns at each other underneath the table. Elliot Gould is completely drunk. They try to stop him from drinking throughout the movie, but he finally gets drunk. And I love the speech he gives when he talks about this, because basically what's happened is the mother's convinced Pam to dump Melvin because he's not Jewish. But now Elliot Gould, and he's great. He gives a speech where he's talking about this young man Melvin who he likes, who has a Rain Man quality about him.
He compares it to Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
Yeah, he says comes to him like a young Sidney Poitier and Guess Who's Coming Together. And then he starts talking about how he loves that he's seeing all these men of different races and creeds around the same table in a tolerable environment. I just think this is some of the greatest screenwriting I've ever seen in any movie.
This is a good bit, too, where they're worried about the tablecloth coming off the glass table because they're all holding guns underneath.
Right. It's played perfectly. And I love the special effect when, because basically, Elliot Gould just puked all over Lou Diamond Phillips. And I love that effect.
Purple, though.
What was that, Jill?
Because he's been drinking prune juice this whole time.
Right.
It should have been purple.
But it looked like he had chunks of tomatoes or something he threw up. But yeah, I love that special effect of, and I don't know how they did it, of the glass flies up because Melvin shotguns the two other hitmen through the table. So you see the glass like come up and fly at the guys. I don't know if that's an optical effect, a stunt, or what. But like, I don't know.
There's your purple puke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the first time it was like yellow.
I don't know how they did that without those guys getting a fucking face full of glass there. But I thought that was great.
Where do you guys think Elliot Gould ranks the big hit in like his filmography?
Probably in like
His
the top
filmography
three.
is so all over the map.
Yeah.
Who the hell knows?
No, I bet Elliot, for real though, I bet Elliot Gould shot this movie, like, he was on this movie probably 2 or 3 days. He probably doesn't even remember doing it.
Oh, yeah. I could legit see him, like, meeting Mark Wahlberg now and being like, we should work together someday.
Yeah. Now, I will say, in terms of this reminded me of another movie, and I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember which one came out first, but this scene does remind me where they're having the shootout in the house. This actually does remind me of the movie from, the scene from Grosse Pointe Blank, where John Cusack...
Grosse Pointe Blank was definitely before this.
Yeah, John Cusack and Dan Aykroyd have a shootout inside a house, and they're kind of, like, talking to each other. That's, like, the only thing in this movie that really reminds me of, like, another movie, you know? Oh, I don't know why. I always thought this was a great bit where Mark Wahlberg drives out through the garage door and he's like got the garage door on the front of his car when he pulls out. I always thought that was like a cool little gag.
I just looked it up and I was like, I was right, but I was like so sure. I'm like, oh, that was like Grosse Pointe Blank was definitely before this. I thought like years. It was 1 year before this.
Yeah,
I didn't realize Grosse Pointe Blank was 97. I was thinking more like 94 or something.
Yeah, so I mean, I doubt that they ripped one off from and it's just a logistics thing of shootout dialogue.
Grosse Pointe Blank is another movie that, to me, in an even bigger way than this, right? Not to get on a tangent of another film, but talk about a movie that was like a minor hit, but then became like everyone knows it. At least from like our age, and like everyone watched it 300 times. I feel like, especially it was on cable all the time.
Oh,
and
yeah.
just there was another early DVD and everything, and yeah.
That's what I loved about this period of time, like back then. I mean, obviously, like I've seen like 3 great movies in the last week, so I don't want to be like Mr. 80s and 90s and say movies all suck now. But like definitely back then, like it was like I would see movies like all the time back then that like I absolutely loved. And it just seemed like nobody else really saw them. But then like 2 or 3 years later, you would hear people talk about them because of the whole like home video and cable thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was just like movie channels would just always played like the same 5 movies.
Right.
Well, that's what
They still do that.
Yeah, well, but it was always like
but nobody
every
watches
day,
it anymore.
like Broken Arrow and Assassins with Banderas and Stallone. Like those were like just on all the time.
Goat and I had this conversation on a previous episode about how some of the movies that to us are like for our generation are just like beloved classics, like Clue and The Burbs and stuff like that. That's because they were just always on. You just would see them constantly. The Last Dragon was like that when I was a kid too. It was just on HBO like every day. And it just now the thing is, like we said, there's just more movies since then, so you don't have the same things repeating over and over again.
Yeah, like I did, and I kind of miss that the whole because like I think you're right, Trev. What you said when people just don't, movie channels are exactly the same. They still show, movies over and over, but obviously because there's different ways and different options of how you can watch entertainment now. Like they're just not relevant anymore. Nobody actually watches them anymore. But
I mean, when I was younger, I would go over to a friend's house and we would hang out. And we would just put on HBO, and if Clue came out again, we'd watch Clue again.
And I think there is something to obviously the movie Graveyard being a nostalgia based show. We're talking about older films and whatnot. I think there is something about that, and I think there's like a sweet spot of like our generation, or maybe people just 5 to 10 years older than us, where like. There are movies that are hits, but they were only movie channel hits, because I have to say, like, every couple days when I look at the stats for this podcast, every couple days, Trev, I've been meaning to tell you this, somebody downloads Clue, dude. And yeah, it's a movie that like never was really big, but it never really dies because people remember it,
And now Ryan Reynolds is going to remake it.
Exactly. I thought this was a great bit too, where coincidentally they crashed into Leela Rashawn's car, his mistress's, and a bag of money or a suitcase full of money comes out, And also within, I guess it was in the suitcase, was the tape of King Kong's Lives.
And he's mostly mad that they were going to keep King Kong Lives.
Exactly, not the $25,000 in cash, but yeah.
Goat, I'm surprised that you've never seen King Kong Lives. I just figured that was a given.
I've seen parts of it.
For your own sake, don't bother.
No.
If there's a King Kong movie that you would like, though, I think it's got that like 80s sleaze that he likes.
Yeah, like I mean, I've seen parts of it. If not, I'm sure I've seen it in its entirety in chunks. I've just never sat down from beginning to end and watched it. King Kong Lives with all this shit that, like, I feel like in the last 5 years, like, a lot of shit has come to Blu-ray with a lot of these smaller labels, and I'm kind of shocked that King Kong Lives hasn't got a re-release on Blu-ray.
It's odd, that one and the 76 Dino De La Rentas one, neither of those got re-released, and I thought for sure at least the
Nobody
76...
wants to have to sit through them to do a new transfer.
I thought at least the 76 version would get a re-release when Skull Island came out, but...
Yeah, there were some foreign re-releases of King Kong 76 on Blue, but they always got out of print, and I've tried to snag them a couple of times on eBay auctions, and I always lost, so I never did get a copy of it. No, I love that we kind of, this feels like this is the conclusion of the movie. They got away from all the things. It appeared like Cisco died in a car wreck, but obviously he wasn't dead. He got up and carjacked Lela Rochon's car. But as far as these characters know, they're riding off into the sunset. And I love that Mark Wahlberg says he's going to go return his copy of King Kong Lives. And then if China Chow is waiting for him outside, they'll disappear together. I thought that was really...
So he's returning the tape, so he does have a moral compass.
Yeah, like it's like a very nice, natural conclusion. But then Lou Diamond Phillips shows up and obviously ruins it. And I have to say, like, a lot of this, like, the ending action part that really is just kind of Lou Diamond Phillips versus Mark Wahlberg, Cisco versus Melvin. I have to say, I'm really impressed by a lot of the action beats in this.
Well, all this stuff in the forest was actually filmed in a public park, and they had to close the park down for 2 weeks to get all the filming done, and kind of pissed off the residents because they weren't allowed to use their park for 2 weeks.
Yeah, because Mark Wahlberg went through it.
But then once they saw the movie, and they're like, "We understand."
Yeah. Okay, this is just like a tidbit. And I was just wondering if you guys ever picked up on this on the other times you've watched this film. But Mark Wahlberg has a really, like, weird, unnatural hair color in this movie. Like, it's kind of orangish, reddish, brownish. Have any of you guys ever noticed that as well?
Yeah, I'm trying to make him look like a redhead almost. It's odd.
Yeah.
Can we talk about his jacket, too?
Yeah, what is this jacket? What brand is this?
I don't know, but it's got, like, it looks like hands making gun symbols.
Yeah. It's very odd.
It needs an origin story. The big hit, the beginning, so we can find out where he got the jacket.
Well, I guess at one point Melvin had
a trademark
tragic backstory.
The trademark of all origin stories. X-Men Origins, we get to find out how Wolverine got his jacket. Solo, we're gonna get to find out how Han Solo gets his jacket.
Yeah.
We need the big hit beginnings so we can find out where he gets his jacket.
Now, I loved all that stuff there where the car rolled over the tree branch and all that, and Melvin
that was pretty cool.
Yeah, like, I just thought all this was really great. Like, I feel like it really holds up. And the little bits of kind of special effects work that are in it, I think even hold up too. There's something about, I think the reason, like, the few optical, CGI, whatever effects in this movie hold up as well as they do, I think it's because... they did it, and then they transferred it back to film, which kind of gave it a fuzzier, more film-like look. It kind of helps it blend.
This is such a great bit where he dropped the King Kong Lives tape.
Yeah, and he literally risks his life to run and dive in front of the car just in time, because basically for people who haven't seen the movie, Lou Diamond Phillips, it's all downhill, but Lou Diamond Phillips is driving this car. Here's a great effect. Obviously, it was in all the trailers.
That actually is pretty well done. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just blends in, the lighting, everything blends in. It just really, and it helps too that they don't linger on it, obviously. But he literally risks his life as I think that was just inventive. I mean, it's not like huge budget the way a lot of action stuff is now, but just literally a guy using a car as a weapon trying to run another guy over in a forest, I think is pretty cool. Here we have Melvin's car dropping off from the cliff overhead. It was dangling off the cliff and it falls. And again, now we have like another time where we think Cisco died. This time they really try to fake you out into thinking Cisco died. And I have to say the fake outs in this movie, like especially this one right here, they really work because when you watch it, like pacing wise and everything, it feels like it is like the conclusion of where the movie should be ending. You know what I mean?
This is pretty funny.
I have to say, like I eventually decided against it, but like last couple of years, I was thinking about if I could open a video store somewhere. I was like even looking for like cheap retail space and whatnot, and I was like literally considering opening a Big Top Video, and I was curious how much I could make it look like it does in the movie here.
Would you try to get that Taste the Golden Spray standee for it?
I mean, I don't think I could probably find it at this point in time, but just in terms of like the name and the signage and whatever, because this is obviously a very fake video store that they built, but it actually looks kind of cool. But yes, I would get the Taste the Golden Spray for it. I forgot to point it out, but the first time you see Big Top Video in this movie, like the front part of the shelves where the new releases are.
Hey, there's a Godzilla 98 poster back there.
Yeah, but like in the front of like the actual tapes on the top row, they have a whole top row of the movie Crawl, like 5 or 6 copies spread out of the movie Crawl, which I thought was interesting.
And there's a bunch of Troma posters.
Yeah, oddly, and there are Sony movie posters, like there's Air Force One and stuff. But there's a bunch of, you're right, especially like on the top level, it's almost all Troma posters.
Well, we should also point out
was TriStar also.
Yeah.
Then in terms of the Troma thing, I'm pretty sure if it's Ben Ramsey or someone else, there's clearly a Troma love here because Mark Wahlberg's name is Melvin, which is also the name of the Toxic Avenger. So
exactly. I never thought of that,
the video store guy, he mentions all the late charges, but he also mentions a charge for the tape not being rewound. Yeah. I never went to a video store that did that.
No, I know video stores that did that.
Yeah, there were some that, like, when I worked at a video store, it was very late. Like, it was already the early 2000s when I worked at a video store, so we would just check the tape, and we had rewinders. We would pop it in. But I remember, I never had to pay it, but I remember sticker. Do you remember this, Trev? Stickers on the tape that said, well, some of them said Be Kind Rewind, but some of them said 25-cent fee if not rewound.
I never had the fees, but yeah, the Be Kind Rewind.
Do you remember rewinders, like when you had one in your house?
Oh yeah,
I still have a tape rewinder.
Yeah.
Although I don't really know why I had one because the VCR will rewind the tape.
No, but like rewinding would wear out the tape, the spools on the VCR quicker. So.
Yeah.
Oh, was that the point?
Yeah. Like at our house, we always just used the VCR because we didn't we didn't watch that many movies on videotape, believe it or not. But my uncle had a huge VHS collection. He had a rewinder that here we go. It's number one customer of the month.
He's the number one customer of the month. He's only been jerking off for a week.
Yeah, but
he's rented a lot of tapes.
Yeah, they put Crunch on the wall, like a huge poster, and I thought it's funny. Like they take your picture whenever you rent a video. I'm supposing at Big Top Video, but they have a poster there that he's the number one, masturbator of the month. But my uncle actually had a tape rewinder that looked like a kind of like a Corvette. Did you guys ever see those? The ones that look like cars?
Oh yeah.
That's an interesting idea. I wonder why anybody came up with that.
I don't know why were there beds that look like race cars back in the day?
This is one of my favorite things coming up. Trev, you know what I'm talking about.
The dolphin noises?
Yeah, he's talking about going on his boat and you hear dolphin noises in the background.
Yeah, it's such a great detail.
Yeah, they're fighting over what would you describe this as? They're fighting on like a big swinging thing from the ceiling, just like a big industrial grid thing. It's not really a chandelier because there's not lights on it.
There's a little thing of movie posters under it, like that.
And Lou Diamond gives a great thing where he talks about he just wanted to sail his boat around the world, see dolphins, maybe kill a couple, and you hear the dolphin noise in the background.
So yeah,
Tom, what were your thoughts when you first saw this scene?
It's great.
The dolphin.
This is This is the it's the video store equivalent of the skeletons in Jurassic Park. That's what this is. That's what they're fighting on.
Yeah, it really is like that. And obviously, with his dying whatever, Melvin was wearing like a big bomb. The bombs are weird in this. Like
this video store. Has anyone ever been in a video store that looked anything like this? Where it's like,
well, this has a second story, like a second floor upstairs.
But it doesn't look like the second floor goes anywhere. It looks like it's just a couple shelves and a bunch of posters.
Yeah. That's like where they keep the pornos. Is what you're supposed to think. Like if you go up the stairs, then you get the pornos. But it's a huge brick building. It's not how you would normally see a video rental store back then. Where usually like in strip malls and shit.
Mine was in my grocery store.
Yeah,
like the one I went to.
Yeah,
there was. I remember there being one in a grocery store here too.
Yeah. And then obviously Avery Brooks and Nishi show up, and they see China Chow and Mark Wahlberg about to embrace, but Mark Wahlberg. He runs back into the... and I always... even the first time... What did you guys think the first time you saw this movie? I always thought it was interesting that, he ran back in. I never really understood why, but I thought it was a good, fake out that it seems like he died.
Yeah, why does he go back?
So that they'll think he's dead.
Yeah.
And his picture as a delinquent renter survives.
Yeah, it floats down. I almost think this movie has a touch of that type of absurd humor that a movie like Heathers had, in a weird way. Just all that coincidental weird humor, things connecting that would in real life could never possibly connect in this. And I kind of miss this type of movie existing that was clearly it's just a movie's movie. It's clearly over the top. Here's a video rental. We never talk about the nerd that much. The nerd, he's crying because his video store is like they make it seem like he owns it or something because he's the only guy that works there.
He was actually only supposed to ever appear in the end scene, but when they shot that scene, they ended up liking him so much that they put him in those couple of earlier scenes where you see him giving his spiel on the phone because they just liked what he did in that end scene so much.
And it's funny.
They say they're making a movie based on China Chow's kidnapping. So do you guys think that we're in the big hit universe and we're watching that movie?
We could be. It's possible.
Someone should make that movie, the movie that her dad made about her kidnapping.
Yeah,
that should be the next film in this series.
Oh, look.
Antonio Zapata Jr. shows up. Yeah, he's the limo driver now, taking her home. At first, she gets excited, thinks it might be Mark Wahlberg, but he stops the car, and turns out Mark Wahlberg was hiding in the bushes, waiting for them to pull up. Now, here you see Mark Wahlberg has his shitty little 5-day goatee. I remember Mark Wahlberg always had that back then. I guess he couldn't grow good facial hair. Do you guys remember this? He always had that shitty little fake goatee.
No.
And there he survived inside the display for Taste the Golden Spray.
Yeah. He literally ran... Now, he had to plan that out, right? Because he had a duck underneath it. When he ran back in there, he knew what he was doing, right?
You would hope.
Yeah.
He was just trying to kill himself, and that just worked out.
Yeah. Yeah, I miss young Mark Wahlberg. I think... obviously, he has done some good movies in recent years, but... not that he could stay young forever, but I just... I guess
Mark Wahlberg misses young Mark Wahlberg too.
Yeah, I guess so.
I miss young Trevor Snyder more than I miss young Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that boat. But I guess the movie industry was better back then, in terms of the type of movies could take advantage. And here we see them on a boat, which I guess we're supposed to assume is Cisco's boat that they stole.
He did say, "If I ever die,
you
can have it.
You can have it."
Yeah.
He never took that back, so I guess it's all right.
It is amazing to think this is 20 years old, I have to say. It goes... Morgan Freeman was boy in Hotel Lobby?
Wow.
What?
Yeah, the little boy with the balloon. Remember that kid? They kept showing some little kid with a balloon for some reason. That was Morgan Freeman.
Morgan Freeman?
And he's a committed actor, I'll tell you that.
He is. He got in the full makeup.
No, I remember all this like it was yesterday. I mean, it's
the big hit really does feel like one of those movies that should never be more than 5 years old or something.
Yeah.
You know, like it doesn't feel right for it to be 20 years old.
I know, and we'll remember when this came out. Like, what was 20 years old when this came out? Like Star Wars, the original. Like, think about that for a minute.
Yeah, like I mean, 20
Isn't that
years
messed
ago.
up?
Well, I mean, even when it came out on Blu-ray, I think it probably came out on Blu-ray maybe like 10 years after it was in theaters. I mean, even when I bought the Blu-ray, which is, you know, the last copy I bought, like I said, I bought all these different copies. But even when I bought the Blu-ray, it was 10 years old. It didn't feel like an old movie, you know what I mean?
It's just everything that was going on in this time period, I just remember so vividly. I mean, Scream was big. Blair Witch Project was being talked about. There, of course, there's all the marketing and stuff for the '98 Godzilla. You know, his foot is as big as this bus, and it's just I remember all of that so well.
Yeah.
And
So for those of you out there who had your over-unders on Bird's mentioning of Godzilla on this podcast, I think we hit 4.
I feel like
no,
that's
but
pretty good.
I think a big part of why this movie, you know, like it doesn't seem as old as it is and stuff like that is it goes back to what Trev mentioned earlier is like this is it is one of the first movies to kind of have that that very stylized, you know, kind of Hong Kong Asian type of action to it in an American film, but it's the kind of action sequences we still see in action movies today. You know, this is still what we get, and so all of that kind of stuff doesn't seem super dated. It's more the, you know, it's the hairstyles and some of the humor about the suburbs and the
video
little
store
things like
Yeah,
that,
the
and the
video
video
store.
store, yeah, that have like a dated feel to them. But it's, you know, the core kind of the movie doesn't have that dated feel to it. So,
Well, I remember too that I think the cinematography dates really well, and then, you know, doesn't date it because I remember seeing this at the time. You know, at the time there was like in general there was much more kind of like darker lighting in films, especially in action films and whatnot. You know, serious films or whatnot. And like this movie is very brightly lit. They go out of their way, like Melvin's house, like there's colors everywhere, whether it be the cups or the cabinets or like that kind of like brightly lit cinematography, and like, you know, even the wardrobe is very intentionally, you know, bright, colorful stuff. Like I feel like that's kind of where we've gone in terms of cinema now. We've gotten to a more bright, vibrant look as opposed to like the darker, moodier look, you know. So like visually, I think this movie holds up very well for modern audiences.
the special features on this are there's 2 commentaries, and then there are
Previews, right?
trailer.
Yeah.
Then there's trailers for Underworld Evolution, Ultraviolet, and Triple X.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
Well, I
'cause-
take back what I said earlier. The DVD doesn't have too much more, but it does have deleted scenes, and
Right,
one of
like-
them is indeed Antonio Sabato Jr. in drag.
Yeah, why? That's whack, man. I remember they did that with Blu-ray as early on as they wouldn't like put on too many special features, even when the DVD had like more. I wonder why. Like, I don't know. It's bizarre. But yeah, that
Maybe
was.
Antonio Sabato Jr. paid them to like leave that stuff off.
He's like, could you leave that off? Like, I don't want everybody to see me in drag. Yeah, Antonio went on to do a lot of DTV films. I've seen a couple of them.
A lot of Asylum movies.
He played
Yeah.
he was in the Asylum version of John Carter.
Yeah, I was about to say, what is it called?
So if you
Princess
ever
of
wanted,
Mars?
because Princess of Mars, and as I wrote in my review, if you ever wanted to see a version where John Carter has a tramp stamp, then that's the one for you.
Yeah, I feel like Antonio's because Antonio, if I'm not mistaken, right, he started off as a male model, if I'm remembering correctly.
I mean, look at him, yeah.
Yeah. But like I remember he was like in Calvin Klein ads and shit. But like I feel like his tattoos like really kind of limit him because he's a very classic, you know, Italian dark looks, whatever. I feel like he could have been more of a leading man or whatever. But yeah, his tattoos were, and he had very 90s tattoos as well. I think Mark Wahlberg was smart to laser off all his 90s tattoos. But yeah, that's it for the big hit, and
Nice and short. Back when movies
Yeah.
were only an hour and a half.
exactly.
Yeah. I miss that.
I miss it a lot too. But yeah, I mean, I genuinely love this movie, And it's funny that we're like, oh, this movie is 20 years old, but this is actually the newest movie we've ever covered on the movie Graveyard. So recently we added 90s movies in the mix, but you can't accuse us of, selling out or anything, because we still are keeping it at least 20 years old, so far. But yeah, like, we've all had different histories, and I guess Jelli was the newest newcomer of this film, but yeah, for a movie that, like we said, is pretty forgotten or not talked about at all anymore. I was very happy that everybody within our little inner circle of podcasting friends here.
This movie opened at number 1.
Yeah,
20 million.
Like, you guys remember that when a movie would like open number 1 with like $10-12 million? Like, what? Like, how has the movie industry changed in the last 20 years? Because like I think probably the lowest opening now is probably 15-20 million, and a lot of them, like, I think right now, like we're recording this on the weekend of Black Panther, is supposed to make like 200 million opening weekend, and like a fucking February opening. That's insane.
Well, I think the thing is too is back then, like whatever the movie, there was a new movie every weekend, and whatever the new movie was probably going to be the number 1 movie. You didn't have stuff holding on forever either.
Yeah, like now it seems like, I mean, obviously there's always been bomb movies or whatever, but it seems like now, like, people, like, they like, as a society, we grab onto one movie to kind of worship at a time. And if
Jumanji was just number 1 for like, what, 2 months or something?
Yeah, and they, like, it's still like doing pretty good at the box office, and they've already announced like the DVD or whatever for like a month from now. So like, it's crazy how, like, now kind of the trend is people grab onto one movie at once. They tell their friends go see it, then their friends go see it. Like, everybody like focuses on one movie, and then if you happen to like be a movie that came out the next week or 2 weeks later, you're just screwed now. Whereas, like you said, back then, people were paying attention to usually what was new that came out or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, any final notes? The only final note I really have on this movie is and believe me, I'm glad, because I love this movie, but I'm kind of shocked this wasn't one of those movies that they made like a shitty direct-to-video sequel for in the early 2000s, because it seemed like it would have been really easy to do that with.
Yeah,
I just to kind of go back to me discovering this movie as my final thought, it was a movie that, like I said, my wife picked it out, and I thought it was going to be like a cheap Guy Ritchie knockoff, and I wasn't super excited, honestly, about watching it, and then it got over, and it fully converted me, and I love this movie, and I'm glad that, I'm glad I found it, glad my wife found it, so yeah, the big hit, it's awesome.
I really like it, and I've only seen it a couple times in the last, probably since the early 2000s or whatever, but it's one that I watched a lot on VHS, so I mean, even though I haven't really seen it in a long time, it's one where like I still, so much of it I remember so vividly, dialogue or certain scenes, and it was fun doing this, and yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a brilliant movie or the best thing ever. Like, Goat seems to.
Oh yeah, it is. It's better than Star Wars.
Saying I think things like I think this is some of the best screenwriting I've ever seen. I'm not going to go that far.
Okay, come on.
But it is a really fun movie, and I think it's ripe for rediscovery. I think it at the time, and maybe still is by people that remember it, kind of was dismissed, but I think it's a funnier movie than people give it credit for, and it's very entertaining, and it moves by at a quick pace, and it's like the perfect length, and yeah, I would recommend it to anyone that likes kind of sillier, more like action comedy type movies.
Yeah, I'd say let's let this podcast be the beginning of a resurgence, because let's face it, when this movie ends, Mark Wahlberg, Bokeem Woodbine, and Antonio Sabato Jr. are all still alive, which means we could get like a sequel now. If they're trotting out all these other old franchises and bringing them back.
Well, now the thing is they do a TV series reboot, so
yeah.
Maybe get a hot young cast for CBS's big hit series or something.
Trev, you meant their characters are still alive, because I was like, well, Lou Diamond Phillips is still alive.
Yeah, what do you, if you guys got a sequel, what do you think the sequel title would be? I'm going to go with The Bigger Hit.
Yeah, The Bigger Hit's the obvious one.
Yeah.
And I hate to go down this dark path, but say this had to be remade for current audiences. Who do you see as being the cast of guys?
Channing Tatum.
Wow.
Channing Tatum would be the new Melvin. I think if this movie was made today and they were looking for the same vibe, I think it's just because it's like that's made for him.
I think for sure Samuel L. Jackson would be playing the Avery Brooks role, don't you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I was actually seeing it. I could see Vince McMahon remaking it with Finn Balor as Melvin, The Miz as Cisco, probably. I think probably for like the little tiny Antonio Sampaio Jr. I think we'd probably get Bo Dallas, and I can't figure out who do you think? You think they would give the Bokeem Woodbine part to
Big E?
Big E? Yeah, I could. You know what? That's perfect. I was thinking, what's his name? The Gator guy for a second, but I think you're right. I think Big E would get
Titus O'Neil.
Yeah, Titus O'Neil. Yeah.
Bird didn't understand anything you just said.
No, he did. Bird's like, I think if they remade it as a kaiju movie, I think Godzilla would play the Mark Wahlberg part. I think Rodan would be Cisco. So that's it for the big hit. Let this podcast be the moment where we draw the line in the sand and we start the revolution. If you've seen this movie and you love it, please give it one more watch. If you've heard this podcast but you've never seen the movie, go rent it. I'm sure it's one of those movies you can rent on Amazon or whatever for like $3.
Let's just now you have a job, everyone. You introduce the big hit to two people and make each of them agree to show it to two people, and then we can get this going.
We'll get it going, and within a year we'll start the what is it, change.org petition to get Mark Wahlberg to sign on to the big hit too.
The Blu-ray is $11.50 right now on Amazon. So
yeah, and I'm sure you can rent it for even cheaper.
Now I'm looking at this DVD cover, and this isn't a good cover either. You have that weird, like, photoshopped hand.
It's better than what you guys got.
Yeah, it is. I will go with Trev. But
everyone. That doesn't even look like Mark Wahlberg on the Blu-ray cover.
Well, it doesn't even look like Mark Wahlberg in the movie. But yeah.
Yeah. True.
So everybody, thank you for joining us. I want to say thank you one last time to all my podcasting friends. Thank you, Trevor, as always hanging out at the graveyard. Thank you, Byrd, for making a return trip. Jelly, I want to say thank you again for coming back. But in a way, this is your first official time on the graveyard, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you were on the 1990s movie Megaplex, which...
Yeah, my job title changed this time from ticket taker to gravedigger.
Exactly. So, thank you guys so much.
Ticket taker to gravedigger sounds like an unreleased Bob Dylan song or something.
Yeah. From ticket taker to gravedigger. But yeah, thank you everybody so much. Thank you everybody. I know we've got a lot of new listeners in the last couple of weeks. Thanks to some online promotion and whatnot. So I want to say thank you. If you're one of the new people who jumped on board lately, thank you. And if you're an old time listener, thank you for sticking around. Keep watching them 80s, 90s flicks. Keep help us keep these movies alive. Thank you everybody, and we'll catch you next time here on the Movie Graveyard.